Hello and welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to another jet video, and today I have a look at yet another German jet, and this time it is the Heinkel 162 A-2, and together with the Arado C3 it features basically the same armament. Now we're talking here about 220mm with 240 rounds of ammunition. The Arado features more ammunition. Now the guns are centrally mounted, and we're talking here about a 6.7 jet fighter with a rank 5 obviously. And today we are on Berlin and we're fighting obviously the British and the Americans. Now the Heinkel 162 has a reputation for being a jet that lacks a lot of things. Firepower, speed, in my opinion even maneuverability. But I think that is questionable because many people say it's maneuverable, others say it is not. I say it depends on the circumstances, what you fight. Should you fight meteors? The answer is no. Should you fight Spitfires in terms of dogfight? Obviously no. Can you fight anything in a turn fight? Questionable for me. But I think let's begin with some historical figures. Now the Heinkel 162 was developed in the need for Germany to have a mass-produced cheap fighter plane that surpasses the performance of the P-51. Now the other German fighter that was mass-produced was the Bf-109s, and they just didn't cut it anymore. Their design was early war, they were heavily modified, they were not easy to use for pilots, and so the Heinkel 162 should have solved those problems. First of all, a jet engine that uses fuel that you can produce easier because it doesn't have to be as pure, for example, as prop engine fuel. The next thing is it should be easily to be mass produced, and this plane was built to a certain degree out of wood. Then it should be easy to fly, which it kind of was, but the handling was very sensitive, I hope that's the right word, because as you can see the jet engine was mounted on the back, so to speak, of the aircraft. Now there were many manipulations in the production which caused many pilots to die from, certain things falling off the aircraft, which, is not that good, to be honest. And yeah, this plane also had the name Volksjäger, but also Spatz, or in English, Sparrow. A Volksjäger also is translated with People's Fighter. Then the speed limit was named to this plane because of certain accidents. Because one of the test pilots died early on due to overspeeding, basically. But at another test flight later on at the Heinkel company, a top speed of 960 kilometers an hour at 4,000 meters was achieved. That's quite impressive, to be honest. I mean, that's a speed the 262 can barely reach. Yes, in a dive, but you know what I'm talking about. Then the first combat operations were done on the 26th of April 1945, and some kills were claimed by the German pilots, and they seem to be true. Maybe not that day, but on later operations, Heinkel 162s should have shot down some Allied fighters. Overall, just 2 Heinkels were shot down by P-51s. That means that overall much more pilots died to accidents, or because of manipulations in the productions by people which had to work for the Nazi companies. And yeah, so people tried to manipulate it. I think the glue that held together certain parts of the aircraft was manipulated by people basically pissing into it, which severely, drastically limited the effectiveness of the glue, as you can imagine. And the next problem was basically that at this time, Germany had a severe lack, not just of resources, fuel, ammunition, and planes and plane parts, but also experienced and well-trained pilots. And so a lot of people that flew this aircraft were not just not qualified and unexperienced for flying this aircraft, but basically rushed into flying it. They had like 10 hours of training and that's it. And then they should fly a jet aircraft with a narrow landing gear and which had limitations when landing. The relatively high landing speed of, I think it was around about 200 kilometers an hour, you know, made it relatively tricky to handle this plane, especially for very unexperienced pilots. Now, this plane was described as very maneuverable, but also, as I mentioned, very sensitive due to the place of the engine on top of the plane. Now, how does this plane work within War Thunder? Well, certainly it is basically outgunned by any plane it will face. And also, the ammunition count of 240 rounds, it's not terribly bad. It allows you to engage one, maybe two targets, but after that, a lot of trigger patience. Then you must not spark good aim, and also I have to say, German MG151s, they have for me personally, they have a very awkward muzzle velocity, and they remind me more on the MG FFMs or MG FFMs than on proper cannons. They are definitely outspeeded by 50 cals and also Hispano cannons, which are more suitable for jet aircraft. Maybe you can compare it in my experience with the 23 millimeters that the Russians get. The next thing is I use air target belts on this plane because sometimes I need to see some shots where they go. As I switch currently through my conversion points somewhere between 200 and 800 meters depending on the aircraft. I'm switching wildly between the nations, the tiers, and the types of aircrafts. And so, I have to remind myself all the time which conversions I use. Was not such a big problem in this battle. Now, what you see me doing here was basically climbing defensively. And this is the first bonus point. At least you can outspeed meteors. Now, I'm not sure if this guy was stock or I caught him in an energy trap, but, I outspeeded him. The Meteors is famous for notoriously lacking top speed, and so I tried to abuse this, this drawback of his aircraft. He turned around, I turn around, and let's see what... Oh, he's dead. Or is he? We will see in a moment. And at this point, I was not quite sure what to do. Now, certainly, I should not engage B-29s. Their 50 cals literally will rip me apart. And I simply don't have the firepower to reliably take them out. The next thing is basically the overheating of the engines. And the first time I had, so to say, experience with this aircraft was actually a video. It was not done by me, obviously. I did not play realistic battles, but I'd love to watch the relatively old videos from Max. And he said that when he made I guess one of the last videos on this aircraft, he mentioned the overheating issues on the jet engine. And to be honest, yes, the jet engine overheats as long as you web. When you go off the web, it doesn't seem to overheat anymore. It cools down relatively quickly, even the oil. Now, obviously, jet engine, no manual engine control is possible, so you have to entirely control with your throttle. Sorry about this. I always had the border of 3,000 meters in mind. That was where you should use the web, but yeah. That was a very old videos. Has this plane seen flight model changes, or how did the thermodynamic updates interfere with this aircraft? I don't know. I can't tell you. But it was very nice to see how this plane performed in this battle. I expected an utter disaster, but it worked out quite well, to be honest. Now I can spoil you here. It was not an ace match. I've flown too long, to this stage, doing nothing but climbing, and so yeah. Now, just going back to the scene at the very beginning, that was from the second battle, the battle after this, and I found it was hilarious. It reminded me on this video that I made a long time ago, the fine art of Russian teamwork. If you haven't seen it, it was quite hilarious. I hope I put the link to it into the video description. And yeah, then what about the overall appearance in this kind of first impressions video, because I haven't flown it so long? Well, it is not a bad aircraft from in terms of acceleration, probably even top speed and so on. I have not tested out enough, but it seems to behave pretty good for a fully spaded aircraft. I have the benefit of making a first impression on a jet aircraft that I haven't flown in such a long time. Yeah, and I tried to go back to the base. I had the mind setting of sticking around our airfield because I anticipated bombers, lurking around trying to bomb the base. That is a nice death spin, I have to say. And yeah, so I tried to stay back from the battle, and it will work out quite nicely. This is definitely not a frontline fighter. In my opinion, it doesn't have the performance, especially against props. It can't turn with any of the props you will face. Maybe it could turn with German props, but realistic battles, as long as you don't get into a mixed match, which are not very desirable in my opinion, you can't turn with anything. He's still flying. The thing is, what can you do with this plane? Well, it is a support aircraft. You have to support your allies. When somebody is engaging them and outturning them, then you can support them. And for this purpose, I think the plane is maneuverable enough when the enemy sits on the tail of a teammate. Now this Spitfire here broke off, and I took my chance, short burst, and I hit. Don't we love hits? Now I seem to not even have, damaged something, and I was not keen on finding out. It's Spitfires, very challenging planes to fly, especially the Griffins. Yeah, and then I came to the right place at the right time, and I saw this P-51. Quite a nice kill, stalling out in front of my guns. And then I took just the chance of taking out this B-17, and I aimed for the wing. Quite a difficult shot to make here, and I killed him. Double strike. Very nice, very nice. And now I turned around, and you can see this plane really, under 500 kilometers maneuverability. Roll rate is decent, but maneuverability not really. And this Spitfire was not interested on a head-on, and so I just, put pressure onto him by following him. So my teammates could, position themselves. And the Me-262 is putting even more pressure on the Spitfire. At some point he has to maneuver. And normally, Spitfire pilots love to maneuver. He tries to dive and to pull up. Not quite the lead. Another hit. He turns around, and I rip off his wingtip. Nice result. Third kill right there. And you can see I'm down to 4 rounds. And I really, except for the B-17, I didn't pull the trigger for too long. This is how fast you can run out of ammunition. A few shots here, a few shots there, a decent burst here, another burst there, out of ammunition. Yes, other aircraft have the same problem of trigger pulling time, so to speak, but they have much more firepower, they have much more density of shells in the air. For example, the Griffin Spitfires and the Meteors, they have 420mm cannons. Same for the F-7F Tiger Cat or the Cannon Bearcat. There are not many aircraft that have the same firepower as you, to be honest. Yes, there might be 50 caliber machine armed planes, but they have 650 cals and they have a higher rate of fire and they have more ammunition. So, you know, the burst firepower might be kind of comparable depending on how you hit. But, you know, you have limited amounts of ammunition. It kind of reminds me, in not such a bad manner, to the Kika, for example, that at the beginning has just one 30mm cannon with just 50 rounds, or the Soviet Yak-15s. But again, they are much more maneuverable based on the Yak-3 frame, something like that. And yeah, so this plane has an awkward handling characteristics. Now, as you could see here, slowing down is very problematic with the new brakes. The landing gears are very narrow, comparable to Spitfires and the Bf-109 series. So you have to be very careful with your turns at the end of the braking. I think you should turn at 80 kilometers an hour. Before that, you just will probably flip the plane. I heard the AAA going off, and it's the Sky Raider, the plane that I thought to die early on, and it has survived up until this point. He wanted to go for me, you know, and I just observed him and, oh, AAA. Why do you waste an A-2 like that? And yes, I have a heart for the A-2. Fantastic aircraft. And the Meteor is still flying. He is practically the last player, let's say, in the air, but not alive. Hostile team has lost all of its vehicles just before I take off. And that's basically the battle. And it was for a first battle after like half a year of flying it. That was quite a nice result. So let's have a quick look at the post-battle results. So the famous lottery giving me a very precious AAA order. So we can see for 3 kills and 11 hits and 1 landing, I got 67,000 silver lines and 4,736 research points for the modifications. But everything is spaded, everything is researched. So yeah, I also was first in team with 1,808 score points. Quite a rare result to be first with that low amount of scoring points, since, you know, ground pounding gives a huge amount of score points. So that was the Heinkel 162 for you. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if so, give it a like. And let me know in the comment section what your experiences with this aircraft are. Do you think it's competitive, or do you think it lacks certain aspects, as I mentioned? Anyways, subscribe if you want to see more, and we will see each other in the skies of War Thunder.